Alabama actually has the most complete fossil record of any state. Actually, geologically speaking, every time period in the Phanerozoic is represented.
Today's guest is Mr. Maximilian Scott, a paleontologist from the University of Manitoba. And ever since I started adding science and scientists back into this podcast, subject matter, I've not kept it much of a secret that dinosaurs and paleontology are one of my favorite things to talk about. So it's not a shock that we dove deep into a lot of different subject matters, a lot of different prehistoric rabbit holes, and of course we talked a lot about the science, not the science, but the fossil record and the dinosaur history of the South, including my home state of Alabama. And Mr. Scott is fresh off a trip to the Museum of the Rockies, one of my most favorite museums to visit. During this trip, he studied injuries in mosasaurs. I know that I had a really fun time shooting this episode, and I hope Mr. Scott did as well. So thank you again, Maximilian, for coming on, and I hope everyone enjoys the episode. This is, of course, the Caffeinated Cryptid podcast, and I am your host, Bobby Dizzle. All ways to watch, listen, and follow this podcast are listed in the description, as well as bobbydizzle.com.
The weirdest ones is when I get people thinking that things like mammoths are dinosaurs, and I'm like, no, that's an elephant, actually.
No, we still have those. They're just less hairy.
Yeah.
Now, don't even get near me with the Dimetrodon. I'll slap it right out of your hand. It's a mammal, you freak.
Well, it's a sort of a pre-mammal, so it's not a true mammal quite yet. It's a part of a group that we would call the therapsid synapsids. So like an early relative of mammals, but not yet a true mammal.
It absolutely blew my mind when I found that out.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, what?
Yeah. One of everybody's favorite dinosaur, Dimetrodon, not a dinosaur. So sad.
Not even close.
Not even close. Closer related to you than to dinosaurs.
What was before the Triassic?
That would be the Permian.
Permian, yes, that's where the Dimetrodon was.
That's when Dimetrodon lived. That's right.
I was very into paleontology as a small child, about 5th or 6th grade. Like I had the books. My dad bought me a kit because I had an archaeology book. He bought me like a kit from Home Depot that had all the tools and stuff recommended. And we lived up in the mountains of North Alabama, so I was finding all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
I had fish and clams.
Alabama actually has the most complete fossil record of any state, actually. Geologically speaking, every time period in the Phanerozoic is represented.
I believe it because I'm just in the backyard and I was finding, I'm digging up. I even had the little squares sectioned out, like you do. Yeah, and I would find them, go down, find the rocks, and I'd find the little seam in them, kind of crack them open with the little blunt hammer. And bust open to like a snail or a lot of trilobites.
Yeah,
and a lot of clams, a lot of clusters of clams up there.
Yeah, that's one of the most common fossils you'll find anywhere is the clams.
I'd imagine it's kind of like the flies of the sea; they're just everywhere.
Pretty much, yeah.
A lot of fish we find too up in the sandstone. If you find like a place full of sandstone, be a lot of fish inside of those. Yeah,
so Alabama was the southern extent of the western interior seaway during the Cretaceous period, so you'd get a lot of those Cretaceous fish. But you'd also get a lot of fish from like the Paleozoic era, when basically most of North America was underwater. Fish, aquatic fossils are typically, no matter where you go, going to be the most abundant fossils.
By the way, how's my mic sound? Just while I'm thinking about it.
Your mic sounds great.
Sometimes it gets hissy. Another thing we find is they look like AAA batteries, but they're like a stack of
crinoids. Yeah.
I mean, those are every freaking where.
Yeah. I have a really funny story. When I was there was this student. He was kind of a weird character. When I was in my undergrad at Indiana University, he had found a crinoid hiking around Lake Michigan, and he had the audacity to approach our sedimentology professor, shove this thing in his face, and say, "Look, I found a crinoid. They're rare." And here I am in the back of the class, just because they're not.
No, that's basically everything.
I've been to a locality in southern Indiana where there are literally millions of crinoids in one outcrop.
Well, that's basically what all limestone is.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Is
yeah. So yeah, from all reef building
Mhm.
organisms, limestone is typically made of their bodies.
Like it's incredible whenever you like clearing a piece of land around here and they bust a piece of limestone open and you look at it and it looks almost like fool's gold.
Mm-hmm.
You know how it's got like the little particulates in it and it's like somewhat quartz, but it's always like what you said, the crinoids, and it's always like little fossils of every little thing.
Yeah.
Just a whole amalgamation.
Yeah, limestone's pretty productive for fossils.
Mm-hmm. Hey, it's about all it is. We got
I
a
mean,
ton
yeah,
of
I
it.
guess you could argue that most limestones are themselves a fossil. Yeah.
That's one of the things. Anytime I have a paleontologist on here, I want to discuss the lack of dinosaurs in the south and on the east. Because
Mhm.
I'm like, what was over here? Because it wasn't underwater forever,
No,
but like,
that's
there's
true.
no way to tell it.
So during most of the Mesozoic, sea levels were significantly higher than they are now. So while the Western Interior Seaway wasn't necessarily always there during the Jurassic and Triassic, um, much of that southern states would have been
Mm-hmm.
further underwater. I was actually during the Triassic there. It was actually pressed up into the southern states were actually pressed up into Africa in
Mm-hmm.
Pangaea. But as they started to split in the Jurassic, those water levels around those southern states were pretty high. So what it comes down to really is just preservation. So Triassic and Jurassic rocks are represented in Alabama, but
Mm-hmm.
um, you've got the additional caveat of perhaps these rocks were not conducive for preservation of large body fossils. So
Yeah.
you've got the I think there are rarely dinosaurs found in Alabama, but it's just that the conditions for
Mm-hmm.
fossilization just were not proper in that area.
And it's too old. I've heard. You know, the Appalachians are like 300 million years old.
The Appalachians
You
are significantly older
know,
than
than the rock.
most modern mountain ranges.
Mm-hmm.
So the Appalachians formed originally during the formation of Pangaea. So that
Mm-hmm.
would have been sort of like towards the early Permian. Actually, is when they would have began forming, and then they would have stopped forming around the late Triassic, early Jurassic. So yeah, that's good. So they've kind of just been eroding ever since then. But
Mm-hmm.
that does also create huge potential for fossilization after that. When they're eroding, a lot of that has to go downhill, and it
Mm-hmm.
goes into these sedimentary basins in the lower Western Interior Seaway. And so that's actually why you find a lot of Cretaceous fossils, Cretaceous body fossils in particular in places like Alabama, is because a lot of that sediment from the Appalachians was eroding directly into that coastal area. So
Oh
you'll
yeah.
find a lot of like mosasaurs actually, and plesiosaurs and sharks from the Cretaceous period down in Alabama and surrounding states.
Oh yeah, yeah. The megalodon thing is popular around here.
Yeah.
Finding them in washed out riverbeds and things.
Hmm. Yeah.
Even
Megalodon, it's significantly younger than the mosasaurs and the dinosaurs,
yeah,
but yeah.
they have a whole exhibit at this little souvenir shop I was at last week. Some megalodon teeth found in the
Mhm.
area.
Yeah, they're pretty common to find. Not one of the rarer fossils,
No, no,
certainly.
no. It's
Yeah,
just it's fascinating that you can find the shark tooth big as your hand in just
that's true.
Calhoun County.
Yeah,
Well, there's that. I
megalodon
remember a
are
kid.
pretty crazy, but they weren't the
I remember.
scariest thing in the sea at the time. I don't know if you've heard of
No.
Leviathan milvayi, which was
Yeah,
this giant toothed whale, which is thought to have potentially preyed on megalodon.
that's the one with the giant mouth.
Huge, and
Yeah.
the teeth like that,
Mm-hmm.
like yeah.
I'm looking at a picture of that. I was going to say in the fifth grade and sixth grade when I was doing my fossil hunting, so obsessed with it. People in school told me I was lying. I remember one kid told me I was lying. He was like, "There ain't no fossils in Alabama." He goes, "It's on a mountain. There's no seashells." I'm like,
I don't think that there's a single state in the union that does not have some kind of fossil somewhere.
mm-hmm. I mean, how would it not? It's
Yeah.
impossible. He was just saying no seashells on the mountain. I'm like, look at the
Well,
map.
there would be. That's because
Had to
they
bring
were
him a
both
book.
friends.
I had literature, baby.
Hmm.
I came with receipts. So, like I was saying, I had my paleontology obsession back then, and it was from I like dinosaurs way before Jurassic Park, and I was in 5th grade in 1993, and so that was the heyday. But what and I met Mike Payne. I think that's how I met you from Paleo. Maybe you
Oh,
commented
okay.
on something. I can't remember.
Maybe.
Michael Payne,
I'm not
Paleo
sure what comment
Prospector.
that would have been.
Yeah, I probably just reached out to paleontologists through a wide net. But like, there's always an origin story to how someone wanted to become a paleontologist. I compare it to like a Joker villain story. So how did you want to become it?
Well, so I don't know that I totally remember because it starts so far back that I
Yeah.
don't necessarily have memory. My mom told me this story of the day that my younger sister was born. She's about just under 2 years younger than me, and so I was less than 2 years old at this point. So while she was in labor, I was outside in the waiting room, and the doctor was talking to me and asking what I wanted to do with my life. This again, keep in mind I'm less than 2 years old at this point. I told him that I wanted to be a paleontologist. So if you can imagine a toddler saying that, so I don't remember the origin actually of this thing for me, but it's kind of it's just what I've always wanted to do. Now, obviously in high school, I had like a phase where I was like, no, that's for kids. So I wanted to be, for a little bit, I wanted to get actually into film. And then for a little bit, I got really high on myself, on my intelligence, because I'm a high schooler and I think I'm at the top of the world. And I decided I wanted to be an astrophysicist. Now, eventually I got wise and realized, I don't like math that much.
Yeah, that'd be awful.
Yeah. So I started college and then I realized, no, I do want to do the thing that I've always wanted to do. And I majored in geology and minored in biology. And straight out of college, I went right into a conservation corps in Nevada for a little while. And then I worked the Wyoming Dinosaur Center's internship. So that was my first experience actually digging fossils. And those were Jurassic Age fossils. I was in the Morrison Formation. So I was digging things like Diplodocus and Camarasaurus mostly. Straight from that, I went to work actually for the U.S. Forest Service in Wall, South Dakota, where I actually got to work very closely with the Badlands National Park. And that's actually one of the richest fossil localities in the world. And that's Eocene and Oligocene mammal fossils mostly. So I got a little bit of experience with that. Then I had a little bit of a period where I had to struggle finding a job because that's just how it goes in paleontology.
Yep.
I kind of stayed with my parents for a little while. In that time, I worked as a preschool teacher for a little while. And then I actually got a job up in Alberta, so in northern Alberta at the Philip J. Currie Dinosaur Museum as one of their research technicians and lab technicians, and that's actually probably the greatest job I ever had. And that in that time I really felt like I came into my own as a scientist. And right after that, actually, I got reached out to by my advisor from who's now my advisor at University of Manitoba, because I'm actually a master's student right now. And she had heard about me from other professors that I'd applied with and offered me funding and said, come apply at University of Manitoba. And that's where I'm at now. Now I'm studying mosasaur pathologies.
Oh, that's quite the pathway there. Yeah, just to get in the way you said your career's bounced around in high school. I was at one time a forestry major. Gonna go be a forester. I kind of wish I'd have pursued that because that would have been. I love being in the woods a lot, and I hate.
I'm right there with you.
I hate actually working, so that would have been perfect for me. They sold me because the dude told us that because I was in the FFA, I was an officer, and he's like, "We can ride the 4-wheeler 8 hours a day." I'm like, "Well, I'm there. I don't care what I got to do for that one."
That's kind of what the same mentality is. I went into paleontology largely because I love being outside and I love exploring and I love adventure and I love solving mysteries and asking questions. And it's one of the outside sciences. So I get to be outside and do science, and that's really amazing.
Man, one of my co-hosts that I have on often is a biologist for insects, and he's always outside. He's doing a volunteer position as a tour guide for insects at a Texas state park, and I'm like, I'm jealous of you. Like, I work in IT, I make plenty of money, but you get to do the fun stuff, and I hate everything being inside. It just sounds like so much fun. But you mentioned earlier you were investigating or digging up Diplodocus. I'm not going to say Diplodocus fossils, but what is that like? Like, if you find one, do you have to because those things are 50 yards long? Like, are they curled up like another dinosaur, or is it just like straight they die and all of a sudden, well, here's you sign the end of the tail and you got to work your way up?
So in the locality that we were working at, most of the bones were not what we call articulated, which is kind of what you're describing, where they're still in the position where the animal died.
Spread out.
So in that portion of the Morrison Formation, what we were seeing was sediments from wetlands. So what probably happened was the animals died and their flesh rotted away, and then seasonal flooding events washed them to another area where the bones were then spread out in these big bone beds. And so you would usually find just jumbled beds of bones at the Wyoming Center quarries. And so when you find something huge like those femurs, like you were talking about, which in some cases are, as long as me, I'm about 5'10", the process basically goes like this. If it's already broken up into chunks, that's so great because you can just take each piece back individually and then put it back together in the lab. But if it's all complete, obviously we don't want to break it. So what we would do is we dig around it and create what we call a pedestal. And so basically the rock underneath it is holding it up, and then we begin the jacketing process. So jacketing essentially consists of covering it in wet paper towel that conforms to the shape, and then covering it in plaster and burlap. So we would basically soak burlap in plaster and then wrap it around the fossil in several layers and then let it harden, which is going to protect the fossil for transport back to the museum. After we do that, we would basically flip the jacket over, and then several of us would carry this thing back to the truck and hope it fits.
I've seen those getting hauled out with helicopters before.
Yeah. We almost did that with a giant hadrosaur skeleton we found at the Curry Museum when I was working in northern Alberta. That hadrosaur skeleton will actually make an appearance in 2025's Walking with Dinosaurs. So a little insider tidbit for you.
Is it does it got like a crazy crest or anything? Or is it just like
So it's Edmontosaurus. So on Edmontosaurus, the crest was actually fleshy, so oftentimes it would not preserve. But there are a few cases where the fleshy crest on Edmontosaurus did preserve, kind of like a coxcomb on a chicken, actually.
Yeah. Like the Parasaurolophus. I can never pronounce that right.
They have a bony crest. Also, I don't think that we actually ever found the head for our hadrosaur, but most of the postcranial skeleton was there. So we had two complete legs. That was how we found it. We found the two complete legs that were still articulated. So we actually named it Legs of the Hadrosaur, and we had this whole shirt like designed where this hadrosaur in a bathing suit with its legs out, like sexy hadrosaur basically. And then we found portions of the tail going out, and we found portions of the ribs going the other way. And so we realized we had a nearly complete hadrosaur. I don't think we ever found the rest of it because a lot of it was still in the hill. Unfortunately, a big portion of that skeleton was lost because in between the time when we had found it and were able to go out and actually start collecting it, there was a big flood. So a lot of it actually just got washed away, which is the unfortunate reality when you're finding fossils out in the middle of nowhere, where it's hard to get to, when you can't just collect them on the spot. And then in this case, this was in this big river canyon up in northern Alberta where nobody lives, so there's no like infrastructure. We had to hike 2 hours to get there. Unfortunate, but so that would have been a case where we would have tried to get a helicopter to grab that thing, but it just ended up being too late. We got as much of it as we could individually, though.
Paleontologists love hadrosaurs. I've discovered.
There's a lot of hadrosaurs. Yeah,
they get very excited about them though. The ones I've talked to, like, I don't know what it is.
Yeah,
they got those telltale feet. I can imagine when you found it, you knew exactly it's a hadrosaur. It's got the foot.
Yeah. They're very interesting animals because they provide a lot of information about the ecology of an ecosystem because of the fact that they are oftentimes the most diverse and numerous animals in a fossil locality in the Cretaceous.
For a while, the little kids, like, what's your favorite dinosaur? They're like T-Rex, Triceratops, Stegosaurus. Mine was always Parasaurolophus.
Yeah.
I can never say it, but I can't say my favorite dinosaur's name. But they had a big exhibit of it over in Atlanta one time, and I had a little piece of a fossil of one. I was like, it's my favorite dinosaur. And then they called him Elvis on Jurassic Park too. Elvis.
Yeah, I remember that.
Speaking of that, I've been doing a mini documentary before my episodes lately. And last week I had a guy that talked about Bigfoot in North Carolina, and
Mhm.
I did a little expose on the extinct or nearly extinct North Carolina red wolf before it, which I thought was pretty
Mhm.
cool. And on this one, I think I'm going to do one on the iguanodon. Speaking of hadrosaurs, how they went from being an allosaurus to an iguanodon somehow. Like when I was
Uh,
little, I don't know how old you are. Well, I was born in '83. In 1988, when I was in kindergarten, the iguanodon was a carnivore. You fast forward, now it's a hadrosaur. Like I don't know what changed.
so it's not a true hadrosaur. It's actually a hadrosaur form. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
within the same order as
Hmm.
hadroforms, but it's as hadrosaurs, but it's not actually a true hadrosaur itself. It's the iguanodontids actually
Hmm.
went extinct before the really extreme radiation of most hadrosaurs. Um, they actually did not evolve from allosaurs. Whoever said that
No,
was
no, it's not. It's not what happened. But like
oh
when we were presented to us as a child, they were presented to us as carnivores. I mean, I'm
okay.
not saying they evolved. They've always been what they are. I'm just saying when I was little,
Yeah.
I remember coloring a coloring sheet, and this was a carnivore. It was like a T-Rex with the thumbs.
That's a really interesting. It might
And
have
the
been
song,
just. That might have come down to the coloring book author because the whole thing about
yeah,
iguanodon is it was actually named after iguanas because their
yeah, it looked
teeth
like an
are
iguana.
so similar to iguanas, and iguanas are actually an herbivorous lizard. So iguanodons actually had teeth that were structured very similar to that of iguanas, which
Okay,
they're very ideal for basically shredding leaves, right?
yeah, kind of spiky, but
Mm.
we
Yeah, so
sing a
it's
song.
like the precursor to chewing essentially.
Mhm, the precursor to chew.
Because later hadrosaurs actually developed their own mechanism of real chewing.
Hmm. We had a song and it said iguanodon something something something. It was very mean, but oh, not so dumb. And I'll never forget it. And I was talking to somebody like 2 years ago about it. I'm like, how about iguanodons turn around? When I was little, they were terrible. Now they're just like a duckbill, but not.
Yeah, there's a lot of old art of them like stabbing
Hmm.
things with their thumbs. I'm not sure that anybody actually has figured out if that's genuinely what they use them for. If it was for some kind of intersexual combat, like
Hmm.
competition over mates, or if it was for defense, or if it was for something that nobody's even thought of, maybe for getting some kind of nutritious fruit open. I don't know, but yeah, so they very well could have been used for combat. I think there's more effective ways to fight something
Yeah.
than with your spiky thumb. My introduction to iguanodon was actually when I was very young with Disney's Dinosaur in the year 2000.
Hmm.
I had that on VHS tape. It was my favorite movie for the longest time.
I went on a date in 2000 and saw that in the theater. I'll
Mhm.
never forget it. That was a good one. The
It was
what's
yeah.
that? What's it called? Like hyper evolution when like a really specific trait to do one little thing. Hypo evolution. Like
Um,
if an otter develops a certain trait to get a type of shrimp that's in a particular area. I'm trying to think.
you mean where traits evolve rapidly in a
Hmm.
population? So that would be called punctuated equilibrium. So that was
Yeah.
the thing that was kind of figured out by Stephen Jay Gould, who was the
Hmm.
major evolutionary biologist during the sort of middle of the last century. He's actually got a lot of really great books.
Hmm.
But yeah, punctuated equilibrium is kind of the challenger to this traditional concept of evolution as
Hmm.
this consistent gradual thing. And it turns out it's not like a one or the other sort of thing. So most likely, and this is scientists have debates about this sort of thing all the time. Is it gradualism or is it catastrophism? Is it a gradualism or punctuated equilibrium? And most likely both are true in depending on the pressures that create the traits.
Yeah, that's a. It was just I was trying to think of what would happen cause the iguanodon to develop just a random thumb spike like a giant fruit.
Mhm. That could have been an example of punctuated equilibrium. Absolutely. I haven't studied iguanodontid evolution thoroughly enough to know for sure what the proposals are on the evolution of the iguanodontid thumb. I don't think that I've heard a certain answer because what they used to do like a century ago basically is just they would just spitball ideas and then publish those
Hmm.
ideas without really supporting them. And modern science kind of frowns upon that. So in modern science, if you're going to spit out an idea, you have to put it in your discussion section of your paper, not in the actual like scientific part of the paper, and you
Yeah.
have to also still give some kind of logic for why you would assume that to be. But you can't just say, here's this trait, it's probably for this, which is what, like Cope and Marsh and Leidy used to do.
That's what they all did when it first started coming out of the ground.
Yeah, well, it's
How we
because there was this like basically competition, right? It was all about getting these things published and making these interpretations before the other guys could. But science is increasingly becoming more collaborative. Now, there are still the competitive few, but I find that science is always better when scientists truly collaborate rather than compete.
One would think. I know the archaeologists are up in arms right now about the pre-Clovis and the things like that. I mean, you can't say anything to an anthropologist about. You can't say the word Graham Hancock.
Yeah, anthropologists, including paleoanthropologists, they get significantly more heated than paleontologists do. Paleontologists, we have our little nerd arguments sometimes, but anthropologists are crazy.
I think it's because the stuff they're studying is still around.
Yeah.
And they have more source material to go off of. And paleontologists, everything's the ink's kind of dry on it. Like you don't get, sometimes you get new things. When it does, it's amazing. Yeah. Anthropologist, man. I got
in paleontology, we're willing to accept and even celebrate the idea that sometimes we don't know.
You almost have to. And the shrink wrap policy concept, whatever it's called, theory, not a theory.
So it's basically like an outdated paleo art convention is that people would reconstruct dinosaurs with their skin basically like attached directly to the bone.
Yep.
Most animals don't actually look like that. You use the classic example of something like a hippopotamus or even a Komodo dragon. Komodo dragon has a lot of flesh around its face. It's not necessarily just conforming directly to the bone. If you look at a Komodo dragon skull, it's actually quite different from the actual face, especially the fleshy snout. But if you look at something like a crocodile would conform pretty closely to its skull. Now the question is, were dinosaurs like that? But the truth is we don't have a direct analog to dinosaurs. Even though crocodiles and birds are the most closely related modern animals to dinosaurs, we have to consider that they're also not derived in the same ways that the non-avian dinosaurs were. So non-avian dinosaurs were an incredibly diverse group of animals. The truth is, depending on what their certain niche requirements were, some of them might have had a more shrink-wrapped look and some of them might have had a more fleshy looking face. And unfortunately, without the proper evidence, we won't know. But it's another example of it's probably not either or.
My favorite example of the shrink wrap is the swan and the penguin. Like a swan looks like something out of a horror movie. Shrink wrap.
Absolutely. The penguins are
penguin. They look like a little velociraptor, but they're freaking fat.
Yeah.
Like, what if that was a T-Rex? What if that's what they look like?
Yeah, that might not be very practical for a T-Rex. I can imagine so. As big as a T-Rex probably overheating with that much fat. The T-Rex is probably pretty chunky, but probably maybe not as chunky as a penguin.
Now, where are you at on feathers?
Okay, so specifically, currently, where the stance is on feathers is that T-Rex probably was not covered head to toe in feathers, but may have possessed some very light level of feathering, kind of very similar to human body hair, right? Where it's just little fine stalks just kind of spread throughout, or like an elephant's hair, right? Because what we find is that large animals in basically these hot environments, like what most of the dinosaurs would have lived in, experience something on top of their normal thermoregulation called gigantothermy. Basically, the larger you are, the more heat you retain. And so it's very easy as a large-bodied animal to overheat. And so you don't necessarily want a lot of insulation on something like a T-Rex.
Yeah, they're not.
But a lot of dinosaurs definitely had feathers. So like Velociraptor probably was covered head to toe in feathers.
I know they're only like 2 feet tall, but that's still kind of scary because you can just.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, anybody who thinks that an animal that looks like a bird can't be scary should look up the shoebill storks. They're pretty terrifying. Or maybe try to pick a fight with an ostrich. See how
cassowary, baby.
Yeah.
I saw a hornbill catch a mouse in Atlanta one time at the zoo.
Yeah,
And
they're
this
pretty
was
good at
like the
that.
most Jurassic Park thing I'd ever seen in my life.
Sometimes they'll parade them around, show them off.
It will. It had it in this little beak. It was running around like a cat that found it. It was like
Mhm.
going to my wife and like looking at it, like look at this. And she's like, I see it. I see it. It was happy.
Yeah, yeah, they're pretty efficient predators, in spite of the fact that sometimes they might look a little silly. So those hornbills are very ornate birds.
Mm-hmm. And the shoe bills are scary. They got a look in their eye, like they know where the
Yeah,
bodies are.
yeah, they look like a predator.
And why are they 6 feet tall? Like that's uncalled for. Like don't be that big and have a bill that big.
Yeah, I wouldn't put my hand in their mouth. That's for sure.
I think they're really gentle though. From what I've seen, because I go down a
Mm.
rabbit hole every once in a while.
I've definitely seen videos of zookeepers and handlers being in the enclosures with them, so I don't think that they would do that if they were a genuinely unsafe animal.
I don't think they're going full, Dionysus.
No, they're probably not slicing open people's bellies at all.
6-foot turkey on them.
Yeah.
I've been obsessed lately with cranes and pterosaurs on the same vein because I talk to.
Mhm.
There's like I deal with like, we got scientists like yourself, and I also deal with cryptids, and so there's like this mainstream like it's like a cryptid underground thing of people that have seen pterosaurs just in
Yeah.
flyways. And so
I've
like I'm
seen-
looking at the hornbills and not horn, sorry, but sandhill cranes and the blue herons, the cranes they have around here. I'm like, man, that's crazy.
Yeah, I think it would be pretty difficult with 8 billion people to not see something that large in the sky
Mm-hmm.
just flying over. And I've seen the photographs that people present, and usually they're not anatomically accurate to the pterosaurs. Like there's this one it's claimed to be a pterosaur from like, I don't know, like the 1930s or something, but it's got basically these bat wings. So the difference between bat wings and pterosaur wings is actually pterosaurs have a very elongated pinky, where basically the membrane would stretch from the end of that pinky down to their body.
Stuck on the
Whereas
end.
in bats, it's all 4 of these fingers would actually have the membrane across, but they have very differently structured wings. So when I see a pterosaur with bat wings, I say, okay, that's pretty easy to debunk.
Yeah, there's also this big thing in Papua New Guinea that there's like a hidden population of them. And if you start looking down, I'm like, man, it could just be legend. Most likely is just some kind of But like they had a major earthquake there a few years ago, and it sealed in a cave, and the sighting stopped or slowed way down. So I'm like,
Well, there's a lot of places in the world where you've got species that are yet to be discovered. I mean, there's still a lot of species that have not been discovered. But if you're not going to see scientists making claims about something like pterosaurs until they've got some kind of evidence of that. So if people genuinely believe this, what they could basically do is they could take genetic samples in the area, basically from soil, groundwater, whatever, and try to look for evidence of unknown reptiles. And if there are, then that would be a basis to have funding to go do a more thorough ecological survey. And maybe you would find something that is similar to a pterosaur, but you could not put that in your proposal of the grant. You would have to basically say, okay, we've got evidence of a species that you don't know about yet, and that's common. It's a lot of species we don't know about yet, and then you could go and you could do this survey. But until you actually have direct scientific evidence, you as a scientist could not really go around saying, I found a pterosaur, I found a living pterosaur.
No,
because people are going to look at you and they're going to think you're nuts.
Yeah, you talking about like eDNA, like they test the water and the soil to get the particles.
Yes. So like what they did with in Loch Ness. Yeah, that university in Scotland.
I got straight up like there is no Santa Claus by an anthropologist on the eDNA one time, and I should have known better because I wasn't really, it's hard to come back and forth between the crazy woo-woo stuff, which is fun, and the actually official science stuff, which is also fun to me. I don't know why.
Yeah, I think science is fun, but I kind of keep the cryptid side on the fun thing for me personally, because
the kid, and his name's Daniel Lee. He's from UK, and he's got a patch of woods over there, and he found a footprint, and he did eDNA on it. and I guess he got it at CVS or something. I don't know where he got his kit at, but he found old world monkey eDNA, and the anthropologist goes, "We're old world monkeys. They just found human stuff." I'm like,
Well, yeah, that
I didn't even think I should have thought about it. My brain, the two hemispheres weren't going together when he told me that.
yeah. So you would need a pretty thorough genetic sample in order to make sure that what you're finding is not human, because you have to consider that there are 8 billion of us. We are one of the most numerous mammal species in the world. The other would be cows. So
cows?
Yeah, so humans
Really?
and cows, humans and livestock actually make up 96% of the mammalian biomass on Earth. So actually wildlife only fits into 4% of the mammalian biomass, which is actually quite sad.
Oh, just the mass itself. I was thinking numbers. I'm like, wouldn't that be rats? I feel like rats.
Yeah, so that would be biomass. So like if you were to create a meat ball of
just stuff.
Of each species, yeah.
Sounds delicious too, by the way.
Maybe not the human part.
Homer Simpson, biomass.
Biomass, yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. I guess, yeah, cows, a lot of them.
There's actually, yeah, so about 60% of mammalian biomass would be cows and other livestock, but mostly cows. Cows would be the major portion of that.
I wonder what the never mind. I was trying to think about what was before the cow, but I guess it was just another cow looking thing.
Yeah, so like oxen.
Yeah, oxen.
Basically, cows are just domesticated oxen.
Because we went down this rabbit hole about elephants.
Mm.
From like now, not we didn't, but with another biologist, and how the elephants just got wild stuff. And that was where when I was talking about the quick evolution, they developed the trunk to reach down and get a certain kind of shrimp, and just how cows.
Yeah, elephants had quite a strong diversity. Actually, if you go to Nebraska, there's in the Nebraska State Museum, they've actually got a whole gallery about the diversity of elephants that once lived in the Great Plains of North America. And we had things like Platybelodon and Gomptothirs and just all of these really crazy elephants with all of these like really large, like scoop-looking jaws. And
yep.
North America was actually a diversity hotspot for elephants at a time. Of course, elephants originated in Africa, and that's one of the last places where they still exist other than Asia. But, we had mammoths, and we had all of these weird four-tusked elephants and just so many things.
Aren't we where camels and horses came from too?
Like so horses and camels did come from North America. So did dogs, actually, the canids.
Yeah, they didn't change a whole lot, but daggum elephants, they went from concept to everyday. I mean, that scoop one is the one that gets me every time I see it.
Yeah, it takes a lot of people aback when they find out that one of the closest living relatives to elephants, that's not an elephant today, is actually the hyrax, which is basically this little furry little creature that lives in Africa and scrambles around on rocks. It looks nothing like an elephant, but it's actually an elephant's closest living relative that's not an elephant.
I thought you were about to say the humpback whale.
No, no, actually whales are closely related to deer.
That's what it was, because whales came from a land animal and they went to the sea.
Yeah, so whales are very closely related to modern deer. So if you go back in time, basically imagine a deer that first became slightly carnivorous and then started to very slowly develop a aquatic body plan, and eventually you get a whale. The whale evolution is actually one of the classic examples of the transition in the fossil record, because it is so well surveyed, and they actually have a very nice and clear transition between these deer-like animals to the modern whales. It's a very extreme transition between them, but luckily the fossil record in that transition is fairly complete, so we can actually look and follow that whole process. It's so crazy.
Makes me wonder if there was ever a time, and I'm looking at him now, that there was like a 4-legged giant whale running around. Oh, wow. It kind of turned into like a plesiosaur-looking otter.
Yeah.
Like a mosasaurus-looking otter.
Yeah, sometimes I think of those early ones as being almost like mammalian crocodiles. They're pretty funky looking. But yeah, on 4-legged giant whales, maybe not. But there were giant whales that had they had vestigial back flippers for quite a long time.
Yeah.
Now, modern whales have lost those entirely. But if you look at things like Basilosaurus, which was originally thought to be a reptile, which is why it's got the name Saurus, but Basilosaurus actually still has vestigial like hind flippers that it didn't really use. But that would be, again, one of those examples of traits becoming vestigial and then being lost in secondary aquatic evolution.
Kind of like those snakes that have the little burr where their back legs used to be.
Some snakes do still have that, yeah.
I know what I was thinking of when they talked about the cows a while ago, because my brain's going 90 miles an hour. The Triceratops and Stegosaurus, but more specifically Triceratops, did they evolve into anything? Or
Triceratops was the end of its lineage. So Triceratops was one of the last dinosaurs that ever lived before the asteroid struck. So they just completely went extinct, and so there were no descendants of Triceratops into the Paleocene. Stegosaurus, I think the answer to that is a little bit more complicated.
I realize they died out in extreme early Cretaceous or late Jurassic, but
that's right, yeah. But so the Thyreophorans, I actually am not super well versed in their phylogenetic relationships, but so Thyreophorans, for people in the audience, that would be the roofed lizards. These are the dinosaurs that had some kind of armament on their back. So that would typically be the Stegosaurs and the Ankylosaurs. I don't believe that the Stegosaurs would have evolved into the Ankylosaurs. I think Stegosaurs as a group just fully went extinct by the early Cretaceous. And the Nodosaurs would have been the ones that diversified and became things like Ankylosaurus and Boreolopelta, etc. So I think in both the case of Stegosaurus and Triceratops, their lineages, at least directly, were cut off with the extinction of the group.
Well, the reason why I asked that question, I've asked it 2 or 3 times to different people, but the chameleon looks like a Triceratops. It's got a frill. It's got 3 horns. I'm like, how did that particular morphology transfer, like that copy and paste to that? You know what I'm saying? With that particular trait, how did that go like copy and paste to one thing so quick and not even be related to it at all? It's fascinating to me.
So you broke up a little bit there on my end. I might be having a bad Wi-Fi episode, but I think I heard the question. So you're asking why some chameleons have the 3-horn structure.
Yeah, how can they look just like a Triceratops with the frill and the horns and the same morphology as a Triceratops, but not be related at all? That's just
that's a really good example of something called convergent evolution, where 2 animals that are not very closely related develop very similar looking traits. So basically what happens in most cases of convergent evolution is that 2 animals that are unrelated would face similar ecological pressures to evolve in a similar direction. In the case of chameleons, I think it's only like 1 or 2 species of chameleon that actually have those horns, but I believe that they are used for some kind of sexual competition or display, which would be probably pretty similar to what Triceratops would have used it for.
Yep.
So that would be an example of an animal that is unrelated to another similar animal that basically just faced these same evolutionary pressures. Or I would say actually probably in the case of chameleon, those evolutionary pressures were quite different, but different or the same evolutionary pressures create a similar result basically for the same thing. So a better example would be like dolphins and ichthyosaurs is what I think about a lot. So ichthyosaurs, I think of ichthyosaurs as like the reptilian equivalent of dolphins, or some of the later mosasaurs are very similar to some early whales. But basically when animals fill a niche, which chameleons and Triceratops filled very different niches. But when an animal fills the same niche as an animal that is now gone, that animal is going to face very similar pressures. I'm not totally sure what the pressures were that created the horns in chameleons. I guess it probably was just the pressure to have some form of sexual display and competition that is separate from different species of chameleon that just happened to create horns similar to a Triceratops. I would say it was just convergent sexual competition. Yeah.
It's just, man, it's a big coincidence. I even got the
frill. It happens a lot.
I guess it does because all sea mammals look like fish.
Yeah.
Like
Well,
you were saying about the ichthyosaur. I mean,
yeah. Just as it turns out, there's a specific kind of body plan that's conducive to being good at swimming.
yeah, I mean, just like cars have to all look about the same, even though Henry Ford and Mercedes developed at different times.
Mm-hmm.
And my father-in-law wouldn't accept the fact that a mahi wasn't the same dolphin as a flipper. I'm like, it's not the same. It's a fish. It means king in French. I'm like, no, I can't eat a dolphin. I'm like, it's not a dolphin. It's a dolphin. Couldn't talk him into it. Still won't eat a mahi. Thinks it's a dolphin.
Yeah. I'm not familiar with that animal, actually.
A mahi?
Yeah.
Oh, it's just a fish, a white fish.
Oh, okay.
It's you know what an amberjack is? Or a tuna? You know what a tuna is?
Yes, I know. Yeah, I know.
It's an ocean fish. Out here in the Gulf of Mexico, they kind of like a flat face.
Mm-hmm.
They're delicious, flaky, golden brown. Putting them on a po' boy sandwich.
I've never actually been ocean fishing before. I've only been freshwater fishing. So
I've never been ocean fishing either. I've just been ocean fish eating.
That's fair. That's fair. I don't find myself on the coast a lot, unfortunately.
We were there all last week at the Gulf of Mexico. I put a dent in the population. Probably going to get the gout from all the iodine I ate.
Oh boy.
I had so many oysters. God, I love oysters.
Yeah, oysters are pretty good. I like a good clam chowder every now and then.
That's why I was in my backyard digging for clams. I was trying to get something to eat. Had my horseradish out. And you ever had the oysters on the half shell, the raw ones, fresh from the ocean?
No, actually, I haven't.
That's where it's at. You gotta really know how to do it because you couldn't make yourself not know how to do it and like, oh, this is terrible. But when you know how to do it,
I would not trust myself to cook any kind of mollusk.
You have to have like a guide. Like my uncle taught me when I was younger because he ate them. And so now he went with us on our last trip, and me and him were just devouring these. They're expensive as hell too. It's like $25 for a dozen, but we're just knocking them out. I'm ordering 2 dozen per meal.
That's totally understandable. Yeah, I don't know. I usually it's the crustaceans that I go for when I go for seafood. Things like shrimp and lobster and crab. It's expensive though, so I don't do it a lot. But
I mean, we're way off the subject, which I'm cool with.
Sorry.
You're from Michigan. You're from Michigan, and how's the food? Dude, me too, man. I am on so much coffee right now because it's the caffeinated cryptid, and I have to get myself drugged up. But what's the seafood like up in Michigan, up in the Great Lakes?
So in Michigan, it's a lot of like whitefish mostly.
Yeah.
So that's the big popular thing is like fried whitefish. Years and years ago, they introduced a lot of like salmon into the lakes, which have actually been while they're non-native to the lakes, they've actually been what's called naturalized. So they're actually not bad for the ecosystem anymore. But so in Michigan, you get a lot of salmon and a lot of the whitefish and things like just trout and salmon. A lot, and then the whitefish basically is kind of what it is. Fish mostly.
There's the mahi.
Oh, okay. I've seen this animal. I just was not familiar with the name.
It's a fish so nice they named it twice. But yeah, I was going to show you that. Yeah, my dad's family's from southern Indiana, and so they moved down here for work.
That's where I went to school. Was in Bloomington, actually.
Yeah, just across the way. They were from Vincennes, just down the road a piece. And so I was raised in the South as Roman Catholic, and so that's a weird combination. That's another podcast in and of itself. But I was going to be a comedian a few years ago, and my first special was going to be called "So I Was Raised Southern Catholic."
Yeah.
Well, we have the fish fries every Friday during Lent, and like down here they have catfish fish fries because it has the country twang to even the Catholic version of it. But you go up to Michigan, it's always whitefish and cod and.
That's that's a lot of wood because it's the cold water fish, right? Basically.
I bet you would like mahi if you like the stuff that's in Lake Michigan because I've researched that before. Just give me because we have a catfish pond like my family does. That's how much we'll go and just get 2 or 3 dozen and cook them up on Sundays. It's amazing.
Yeah.
What happened to my layout there?
It sounds pretty good. Yeah. Unfortunately my diversity of experience with fish has not been very high.
Now I'm starving, by the way. God, I had a po' boy last week. That's a giant sandwich they make. Okay, so you know what they are.
Yeah.
And it was just a big flaky whitefish po' boy. made the way you want it.
Last time I went to Mississippi, I had an alligator po' boy, and I'd never had alligator before, and it was kind of awful actually. It was very chewy. I wasn't necessarily fond of the texture.
I grew up in the South, and I'm Southern.
Mm.
Let's talk about alligator and crawfish right now. No one actually likes those things.
I like crawfish.
And I'll doubt. No, you like crawfish. Crawfish are delicious.
Yeah,
but you don't like them as much as some people think they like them.
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
if they're already prepared, and you have the tail, and you have your remoulade, your hollandaise sauce, and your comeback sauce, or whatever, and you dip it, and you can eat them. But this whole thing where you get like 50,000 of them and cook them, and you have to dissect them I don't like doing that.
That sounds like a very tedious activity. I don't think that I would enjoy that.
It's a piece of meat as big as your thumb, and you got to have 90 of them. And by the time you're done, you're wore out. Like, I'm tired of eating. I'm not an otter.
Yeah,
I shouldn't have to do this. But,
that's true. Yeah.
And alligator tastes just like gristly chicken.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
But
that's
the reason-
basically my experience. Like the flavor
Mhm.
was fine. It's just the text. It was like too chewy.
Yeah, man, there's too much going on. And the reason Cajuns ate them is because they were starving to death. And I'm okay. I
There's
know
not
why
much
they
else
ate 'em.
around. Yeah.
But this whole, I love crawfish. Do you? Or do you just like shrimp?
Yeah.
Because it's the same thing.
I'll say this about alligator: it's better than rattlesnake, which is the other weird thing that I've had. I actually had rattlesnake at one of the restaurants near the Grand Canyon. That you just could not chew at all. There was no biting into rattlesnake. It was so gamey.
Their textures are close. Just that eat it for the nostalgia of it. My friend thinks that I like deer for that reason. I said, no, I actually like deer. I got pretty good at cooking it in college.
Yeah, I haven't had a lot of venison, but what I've had has been pretty good.
I just make it in chili. I mean, nothing's bad in chili. You can put dog crap in chili.
I suppose that's true if you really feel something about it.
What was I going to ask you anyway? So I get back on the. I was going to say, I knew this fact when I was younger, and I don't know if I forgot it, but what makes Alberta the dino capital of the world?
Basically, just the number of dinosaurs.
Yeah.
So more dinosaurs are found in Alberta than anywhere else in the world, and that is both by numbers and by diversity. And so, essentially, what that boils down to is like what we were talking about earlier in the show: is the conditions of preservation were just perfect. So you've got basically the Rocky Mountains to the west, which have a lot of sediment that are coming down off of them, and then to the east you have the Western Interior Seaway. And so basically you're just sitting here in this like wetland between this huge sedimentary source and then the Western Interior Seaway. And so much of what died was just covered in water and sediment, which allowed for fossilization to happen. It was just basically ideal conditions here.
It's like the perfect storm.
Mm-hmm.
I remember watching documentaries on that when I was little. I said, I can't remember why. I assume that's what it was. Like that's where the most of them are.
Yeah, and it's all Cretaceous dinosaurs here in Alberta. There's never been a Jurassic or Triassic dinosaur that came out of Alberta.
Yeah, just like kind of like Montana's all T-Rexes and Triceratops.
Yeah, well, Montana's certainly the T-Rex capital of the world.
I got a picture next to old what's his name out front of the Museum of the Rockies.
Jack Horner?
No, the famous T-Rex skeleton they have out front.
Oh yeah. I don't remember his name.
Yeah, it's like old Spiky or some shit,
Something. Yeah, I've got some photographs with him too.
Was it Denver Fowler? It doesn't matter, but yeah, I had him on here. The one that studied under
Denver does a lot of podcasts. Yeah,
he's. I didn't know he was English.
Yeah,
till he came on here.
I'm friends with him on Facebook, but I've unfortunately never met him in person.
He's a cool dude. You ever talk to him like online or anything?
Not thoroughly. We've had interactions and comments.
Yeah.
But I actually applied for the internship at the Dickinson Museum the year that I actually ended up working at the Wyoming Dinosaur Center. I did not get it, but that would have been my chance to meet Denver, but I still haven't. So
he's a friendly dude.
Yeah, I've heard. Yeah,
had to ask him about his cowboy hat. I said, let me get your cowboy hat advice. He was telling me his model and everything. I said, because you're rocking the hell out of them things, every one of your pictures. So I got to know what kind you have.
Yeah, we love our cowboy hats in paleontology. I don't have mine here in the apartment with me. It's out in the car. I should have brought it. Oh well.
I think that was part of the. I was really confused when I was younger about you see everything about Montana and it would have cowboys on it and not dinosaurs. I'm like, well, there's dinosaurs in Montana. Why is everything about cowboys and cattle?
Yeah. Oh, that's because just about every person you meet's a cowboy out there.
Yeah. That's
A
what I,
large
that's
portion
my,
of the Montana population is actual cowboys, actual cattle farmers. So
you got some that are some that just live in Bozeman and just eat tacos at food trucks.
that's true. Bozeman is what I would call a college town, actually.
Sorry, my wife's sending me
You're
a
good.
message here about verifying a Verizon, trying to get new phones. Come on. One time she locked her keys in her van at a car wash right when these things were starting.
No.
And so I'm just like trying to talk to the locksmith and podcast at the same time. Yeah, we went to Bozeman a couple years ago, and that was just like I wanted to stay there forever, and I still do.
It's a very nice town. You've got, I mean, it's like basically the cultural center of Montana, right? I mean, I know that like Billings is technically a little bit larger than Bozeman, but Bozeman's got a little bit of everything, and the Museum of the Rockies. So like, I don't know, I could very easily live in Bozeman, and you've got the Rocky Mountains right next door. So like,
and Yellowstone is right there.
Right, Yellowstone's just
an hour away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Bozeman.
Like I was looking
I'm sure. I think
I was looking at getting an RV and just moving there.
Yeah, I wouldn't blame you. Yeah, I've thought about it.
I would move to Ennis though, just down across the canyon.
Yeah.
The Madison, is it Madison Canyon? I think so.
I'm not sure. I did my field camp in my undergrad out there in the Tobacco Root Mountains, which are just an hour west of Bozeman.
I don't want to hang around a lot with the extreme hipster crowd. You know, just
there is certainly, well, because it's a college town, so you do have the sort of hipster culture, which definitely comes with the territory. They're not typically the group that I hang out with either, but also I'm basically only hanging out with scientists. So
yeah, I mean, I don't mind them. I don't care because they're kind of like a necessary evil, for lack of a better term, when it comes to good food and diversity of food. And
everybody has different ways of expressing themselves. I don't know.
With little mustaches. Actually, but my God, wherever they're at, Huntsville, Alabama's turning into the Bozeman / Austin / Portland of Huntsville, of Alabama. Boy. And so, because we have NASA here and everything, and like all the tech jobs.
Oh, right, yeah.
And so we're getting imports from everywhere. It's turned into Austin. I call it Austin. It's the same place. We have the food truck conventions, and we have all the different things. And I hate that all the people are here, but man, the food is good.
Yeah, there's definitely an increase in cultural diversity of food and the quality of coffee, I've found.
Dude, coffee, man. We have coffee shops. I go to jiu-jitsu, and everybody there's obsessed with coffee and marijuana, but I can only do coffee because I work for the government. But but they got coffee here just on every corner, just good and bad and otherwise. But some is just amazing.
Yeah. There's some pretty good coffee actually here in Drumheller, I've found. There's this one called I think it's Black Mountain Cafe. They've actually got some of the better coffee that I've had in Canada so far.
You know what? I actually usually drink Tim Hortons on this show.
Tim Hortons is good. I do like. Where do you get Tim Hortons in Alabama?
On Amazon. They sell it in 3-pound cans. It looks like a mortar round. It's huge.
Whenever I go home to the States, I tell people Tim Hortons is basically like Dunkin' Donuts, but better.
Well, there's one in Georgia too, but
is there? Wow, I didn't know there was one that far south.
Down by Auburn, Columbus, Georgia, and I've been wanting to go because one guy here in the state did a whole donuts of the country, and he had Tim Hortons. I'm like, where the hell did you get Tim Hortons? I had to look it up. I'm like, no way you drove like 19 hours to get some donuts, and that doesn't even count. Now, the best donuts actually in the whole United States, and I stand by this, is actually the Daylight Donuts in Hays, Kansas. They actually have their donut baker is an artist. It's insane. You take one bite and they just melt in your mouth. And the lady who runs the shop is like the nicest person I've ever met. She gave me like 5 free donuts just because it was my first time there. Really? Yeah, it was. Daylight's good anyway. Yeah, but this specific Daylight has ruined most donut experiences for me because it was so good. Yeah. Well, have you ever tried Duck Donuts over on the coast, over on like North Carolina? And I've actually never been to North Carolina. I'm actually going to be visiting there for my first time in November for Thanksgiving with my girlfriend. Yeah, go to Duck Donuts. Look one up. I don't know I don't know where she lives out there. It may not be that far.
So we're going to be doing Thanksgiving with her parents in Charlotte. Do they have them in Charlotte?
It might. Charlotte's about midway.
It's Doug Donuts?
Duck, like a duck, like a
Doug.
Oregon.
Okay.
Now I'm looking it up. Duck Donuts, Charlotte.
That will be.
Yeah, but Duck Donuts is insane. they got like the donuts with bacon on them and things.
Oh, that's crazy. Wow. I've had donut burgers with bacon on them. I will say, I think that donut burgers are a mistake because you can't hardly hold them. But
we have there's 4 in Charlotte. You're in luck.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I just looked it up.
I'll have to recommend that then.
Or near it anyway. I bet she knows about it.
She probably does. Yeah,
guarantee it.
So.
Yeah, I think donut burger's a little much. I think you're overdoing it. Like,
yeah,
I
had one in Mackinac Island, and it was like the flavor was fine. It was falling apart because a donut, donuts just fall apart a lot easier than burger buns, and it was sticky, and it just ended up being kind of an unpleasant experience.
And they end up like trying to roast or trying to caramelize the syrup on the or the sugar of the bun, and it's always like, well, I can't hold it.
That's kind of the issue.
Like disintegrates.
I don't know. It tastes good. Yeah.
Hey, it's one morning I woke up thinking we were having French toast, and my wife had made French toast out of Krispy Kremes.
That sounds really, really interesting. Was it any good?
Oh, wow, was it?
Oh, boy.
It was so sweet it was hard to eat.
Oh boy,
it was good. I mean, it was just like the sugar and the Krispy Kreme, our syrup and the Krispy Kreme, and it was caramelized a little bit.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. Maybe I'll have to try that.
Definitely will. So, let me get back to my list here. This conversation's going everywhere, and I am for
that. Happens everywhere that I go.
And yeah, and we're not helping each other out. We're enablers. Like, take another shot. Got off on coffee. It took 3 hours to get off of it.
I worked out a little bit earlier, and I took pre-workout afterwards to feel quicker, and I'm a little bit hyped up on that right now. So
I understand. I take a noon tablet that has a little bit of caffeine in it for working out. Because I've had a bout with sciatica a few years ago, and my leg still cramps a ton. And I try to do everything I can to keep from that, and nothing helps.
I got a bad knee myself.
Got a trick knee.
Oh, you got a trick knee?
No, I'm just saying, like the old veterans always say, got the trick knee. I can feel it.
Yeah, no, I tore my ACL a few years back, and it just never properly healed, so it just locks up every now and then.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, fell down the stairs.
Happens. A football player.
No, I was actually running so I wouldn't be late for chemistry class, and I fell down the stairs and then didn't make it there after all. So
you were definitely late if you tore your ACL.
I was late.
Call the ambulance at that point.
I know. I actually limped to all of my classes for the rest of the day before I went to the hospital.
Holy! How'd you even listen?
Poorly, and I was sweating. I was sweating like a dog, and I was in pain all day. And then finally, all my classes are done, and I just limped my way over to the student health center. And they're like, "Oh, you got a tear in your ACL." And I'm like, "Okay, what can be done? Well, can you afford surgery?" And I said, "No." So I never got the surgery. I just kind of basically exercised it, and it mostly works. I can sprint fine. It's just every now and then I'll just turn over wrong in bed, and it'll lock up at about a 45-degree angle until I walk it off.
That's like they say, if you tear your meniscus in your knee, you don't have to have surgery. Just let it heal. I couldn't do it. What I was going to ask you about, we talked about the park ranger thing with the I can't think of his name.
Travis.
Yeah, and you actually worked with them over there. What is there? The reason I wanted to have park rangers on is because I do the cryptid thing, and I wanted to know about it's like a A and B question. Is there a protocol whenever like a park guest says they had an encounter with something that may or may not be paranormal, UFO, Bigfoot? Is there something like?
So I don't know if there's necessarily a protocol. People report interesting things that they see, generally speaking. Usually the things that they have protocols for would be like, if you find a fossil, you can report the location and show a picture, and then they'll give you like a little "I did the right thing" patch. But if you saw something that you couldn't explain, usually it would just be people would speak to a ranger about it, and
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the time it just ends up being an animal that they didn't really
Yeah.
know about. And yeah, I'm not sure. I never really got, when I was working for the Forest Service out there, I never really got weird claims about things. I basically really, it was a lot of people trying to get me to say my political opinions, and a lot of people not knowing where things were, even though I gave them very simple directions, and a lot of very poor understanding of how wild animals work.
It's like working at a retail store. Sounds like it's like the same people.
Yeah, I learned by working with the public that most people are not particularly intelligent.
They're not.
Yeah,
And I hate that about them.
it can get frustrating sometimes.
Yeah, because we got a Huntsville subreddit, and somebody said, "Are the scorpions in Alabama deadly?" And everybody's like, "What? I'm like, what? What the hell? You knew? Like, you didn't know there's scorpions here? No, we didn't know." I'm like, "Get out."
Yeah, if you get stung by a venomous animal, I'd say probably just talk to a doctor about it, regardless.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Hopefully, this isn't like post sting.
Yeah,
you're asking
even
Reddit.
if you don't die, you're not going to have a fun time.
No, I don't like getting stung by anything. I just cleaned out my old garden boxes before we did this podcast, and I got ants all over me. Thank God I made it out unscathed.
Yeah, fire ants. I've had them. That's not fun.
Oh, they were in droves too because they were in a board, and so they came out like the freaking 300.
Yeah,
this is Spartan.
They get pissy. That's for sure.
Yeah, what the Great Basin is where you worked, wasn't it?
So that was where I did my conservation course.
Yeah.
So basically, that was just kind of all throughout the Mojave Desert, basically, in southern Nevada and a little bit into California. So we did Death Valley as well. So I definitely saw my fair share of things like scorpions and rattlesnakes out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was like one of my two parts of my questions. Like, you may have worked at a national park where there were no happenings such as what I was talking about. So yeah, great. Maybe I guess best case scenario out there would be some UFOs.
So that's kind of the spot for it, isn't it? Because you do have Area 51 out there. I did go to just look at Area 51.
Oh, you went out to the black mailbox?
Because you drive up and then there's this big fence because Area 51 is huge. You can't see any of the infrastructure or anything. But I was driving up and I could see like little sparkles on the hills in the distance, and I'm like, oh, they're watching me.
Yep.
And then basically the gate opened and like this big Hummer started rolling out. And I'm like, no, I'm gonna turn around. I don't want any part of this. And I just left and it was fine. But
I can't imagine working, because I've worked with the Army for years, just near them. I wasn't in the Army, but I can't imagine the humor that they get from this stuff.
Yeah, I'll bet. Well, because I knew they probably knew who I was the moment I started getting close.
Mm-hmm. They recognized you.
They survey that area. But also, my opinion about Area 51 is that if there was some kind of thing where the government is hiding some kind of alien secrets, they wouldn't keep it in the place where everybody thinks it's going to be.
Oh, it's not on top. Yeah.
I think Area 51 is probably genuinely an Air Force testing base. Mm-hmm. If they were, and I'm not saying I necessarily think I think the government are pretty incoherent. I think that they're honestly probably too stupid to effectively keep such a big secret. But if they were, I think it would be in plain sight somewhere that nobody really expects. I think it would be somewhere like underground in New York City, quite frankly, where nobody would think to look.
Except for Will Smith.
Yep.
Yeah. It honestly, if I had to sit down and like smoke circle it out in my head, about where an alien would be, like at one point, maybe they were at Area 51 and they were in a bunker, like 10 miles underground or 10 feet. And then eventually the people retired and the next bunch came in and the policies laxed. And all of a sudden the 10 aliens they have are now working for the government. They're just employed. And like, that's an alien over there. Like, don't say anything about that. I don't want to have to fill out paperwork. And that's just like 50 years go by. Nobody acknowledges it. They're like, I don't see it. I don't see it.
Yeah, no, I will say I do find it interesting that the United States government has started acknowledging the potential for extraterrestrials in open capacity, and even having public Congress hearings about it, which I have found that quite interesting. And I did see something that I wasn't sure about in the sky one time, but I'm not sure that I believe very strongly that we are not the only life in the universe. I don't discount the possibility that things could come here, but it's like because I'm a scientist, it's like until we know, we don't know.
Coincidentally, I just talked to a really nationally known scientist about that exact same thing about 2 days ago. You may know him, Robin Hansen.
I haven't heard the name.
He's been on a bunch of the big podcasts, done several TED Talks, and I just happened to reach out because he had his email right up there. I'm like, well, I'm emailing everyone that has their email out. I'm just like a little fish just taking a bite. And he came on and telling the probability of aliens and using the example of priors, like if there was a prior to set an example off of, and he talked for an hour about, like, I felt like I was in a class. He started asking me questions if I was listening. I'm like raising my hand. I'm like, and I just get like a little kid with my legs crossed watching like their dad telling a war story. And I forget I'm a host half the time. And he was telling that kind of thing, like there's probability, and the reason we haven't seen them is there's some kind of ordinance against expanding, and
that's a lot of speculation, I think.
Oh yeah, I mean it's big. It's like a multi-part hypothesis he's putting together with probability and different things like that.
I don't know if we can assume how cultures of a species that evolved along a totally separate lineage from our own would work, you know?
Well, one of them was, this began with the star being born in a cluster Oort cloud.
Mm-hmm.
That's how far back it went, and the life was seeded on the planets from the stars that at the same time, and so they kind of like evolved, not simultaneously, but like from the same seed in the same section. So we're like siblings. So it kind of started there, and I have to send you the episode when it's done. But it was like I must have blacked out because I don't even remember recording some of the stuff he talked about.
Yeah, I haven't heard about this. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's called Grabby Aliens, Hello Aliens. He was on Lex Friedman.
I do know that NASA did a statistical calculation, and I think that they came to some conclusion that there's probably about 32 or so civilizations in the universe that we would call intelligent.
32?
That's what NASA in the galaxy. That's what they say.
Oh, in the galaxy. I'm like, in the universe.
Not in the universe. No, in the galaxy. Yeah. Well, it would be kind of hard to calculate that for the universe, given that we don't really know how big exactly the universe is.
You ever sit down and thought about it, like how big it is? You can't do it.
I don't think that I have the mental capacity to really grasp how large the universe is.
One time we were fishing next to a steam plant and had a 1,000-foot exhaust tower on it up on the river. And you're up next against it, and it's just like the wall of the river is. This is relevant, by the way. I'm not just going on a tangent.
That's okay.
The wall on the river is just right next to the steam plant, and it goes straight up. And you look, and you're in a John boat, and when you look up to a 1,000-foot pipe from the river, you almost fall backwards at how tall, because you keep looking and looking and looking. That's so, and you just don't fall backwards. And that's how it feels to me when you think about how big the universe is. It's just like, Jesus, like you think, well, from here to, Winnipeg, that's 3,000 miles, 2,000 miles. That's when you think here to the moon, 400,000 miles. But you can't picture how long it is.
Yeah. No, you can't. And then that's just nothing compared to
the
grand scheme of everything.
And it took everything we had to get there. Just if you
I find it hard to comprehend the size of a mountain when I'm looking at it sometimes.
Yeah. Like, you ever seen the Grand Tetons? It takes you see those things for a day. You see them for a day before you get to them.
Yeah.
We drove toward the Tetons, and it felt like I drove till I couldn't walk, and we weren't even there.
They're pretty big. It's true.
We were sitting at the Mormon camp in Jackson Hole.
Oh, okay. I know Jackson Hole.
Well, when you go north of Jackson Hole toward the Tetons, kind of runs parallel. They got the old Mormon town. Oh, everybody takes a picture of the barn out there.
I must not have been out that way.
Yeah, I got a good video of a plane coming in. The plane comes in right next to almost where the white caps are on top of the Tetons.
Oh, really? Wow. The
plane flew right there, and I got a bunch of views off of that.
That's really cool. Yeah.
Because I started playing. It was either Rocky Mountain High, which appropriate.
I love John Denver.
Yeah, or or it was there's a song by Hank Williams Jr. called "All in Alabama," and it's about when he went out to Montana and fell off a mountain, and he didn't think he's ever going to get back home because he nearly died.
Yeah.
And so I might have played that one with it because it was off the mountains, same mountain range.
Yeah, if you're used to the Appalachians, sometimes the Rockies can be a whole different monster.
Yeah, and the age, like we discussed.
The Rockies are far younger, which is why they're so much bigger. Yeah.
The Rockies, they were like just in time with the K2 event.
Well, so the Rockies actually started forming at the end of the Jurassic. And so by the end of the Cretaceous, when you've got things like T-Rex and Triceratops, they actually would have, been able to witness the Rocky Mountains as they were, actually recognizable, just massive mountains. So it's, they're only finally starting to slow their growth. That's because actually under North America, there's this plate that's subducted shallowly called the Farallon plate from the west, pushed by the Pacific plates. It's actually still under us, and they've actually done like ground penetrative analyses to actually figure out the location of it. So actually, the Farallon is actually almost done subducting, not in our lifetime, obviously, but
so they're still growing.
They're still growing, not as fast as they were, but they're still growing. So that's actually why things like the Tetons are as sharp as they are, is because those are areas where they're actually basically the higher and sharper a mountain is, the more growth it's experiencing. But typically those rounded mountains like the Appalachians have not experienced growth for a very long time.
Yeah, they're flat. We got everything's a plateau here. And I grew up on the foothills of the I actually most of my family's land is has Appalachian Mountains on it. It's just all limestone and coral.
Yeah, and they're kind of their own challenge when you're hiking because of all the plant material. It kind of gets in the way. Bushwhacking can be kind of hard out there. Sometimes it's the bears are a little bit extra mischievous there because they're more used to people. And they're more used to food people.
They're not the deadly bears though.
No, they're all black bears. But actually, there are. I think I read a statistic that there are actually more carnivorous events from black bears in the Appalachia than there are from black bears in the Rockies, because I think that they associate people with food more.
Yeah, I would believe that. Yeah, because
people
more chance for interaction.
More people, and so there's more trash that they're getting into, and etc. Yeah.
And they're in the freaking towns.
That's true. Yeah.
In the dumpsters.
Yeah. But typically, if you encounter a bear, if you've got bear spray, you're going to be fine. 98% of bear attacks are stopped by bear spray.
Somebody just got slapped by one this weekend. A grizzly bear. Did you see that one?
Got slapped by a grizzly bear?
He was feeding it potato chips.
That's an idiot. That's how you get. Yeah. That's how you get slapped by a grizzly bear.
You could feel the California plates in the video, but you couldn't see them.
You've got to be respectful to an animal like that. I don't think that it's productive to necessarily actively fear them, but you definitely have to know that is a powerful animal that you cannot very easily predict, and you have to keep your distance. So the Park Service actually recommends you keep a distance of 100 yards from bears, which is I'd say a pretty good distance, and then 25 yards from something like a bison. But you definitely, there's never a reason to approach and feed a bear. That is exactly how you put yourself and the bear, quite frankly, in a dangerous situation.
The poor bear is in more danger than you are at that point.
Well, and people fail to consider if a bear attacks somebody, even if the person survives, they have to go put the bear down, which is tragic. But because people
like bears,
when people are stupid, it does impact wildlife, and wildlife is struggling right now, even here in North America, where we have probably the most beautiful continent in the world here, with every biome imaginable. Even our wildlife is struggling. And I think that people need to learn how they can do their part to not be an idiot and impact the wildlife negatively. Things like feeding bears impacts wildlife negatively, and yourself. Like you're putting yourself in danger. It's so stupid. I watched people try to feed moose too, and that's worse, arguably. Moose will kick you to death.
They don't false charge either.
No.
Moose is coming. It's coming. It's like a Cape buffalo.
Well, moose can false charge. Usually you would have to discourage a moose's charge by stepping behind a tree or something. But I would rather take a bear than a moose any day.
That's moose makes your eyes do things when you see them because you're like, oh, it's a deer. Holy shit, it's 7
They're
feet tall.
huge. When people hit a moose on the road, usually the moose will fall on top of their car, and that's how they die.
See the Mythbusters of the moose?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, go look at that. They have a whole episode on Alaska. One of them was what's a moose do to a car, and they built a moose out of old pigs.
Oh boy.
Yeah, it's a speaking of meatball.
Yeah,
like we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out. That's really curious.
You really should, because stuff's everywhere. It's just everywhere. You know, they just reintroduced elk up here in the Appalachians too.
Did they really?
And they're in Tennessee, just north of here. My dad's like, I hope them fucking things don't get down here. I don't want to hit no elk.
Yeah, hopefully the bear populations are big enough to help keep the elk populations under control, or there's enough hunters to take care of them. But I also know how dangerous that can be. Being from Indiana, where there are no real natural predators for the deer, they get very out of control.
They do.
Even the hunters can't really do much about it.
Yeah, we got a lot of deer here, and that's about the only thing we have a lot of. Big wise coyotes are out of control.
That's the thing, is if you have a large herbivore population, you need to have a large predator population. Otherwise, because humans, we just are not efficient enough at taking care of them
we can only do it so often.
Yeah.
It's not like we're always out there. And in my county, I haven't hunted since, my grandparents passed away and they lost their farm. But back then, you could kill 2 a day, every day during the season, and it wouldn't make a dent.
Yeah.
And I can't help but think, I don't think it's gotten any better because they made it to where you can bait now. Like, dude, just kill these things.
Yeah. Well, things like, we do need to control those populations, because eventually they're going to start decimating the plant populations, which is going to affect the rest of the ecology.
And we've started having the diseases move in.
Yeah.
From the wasting disease and the blue tongue.
That's another thing that would be taken care of if we had more native predator populations, because predators usually go after the sick. And so actually that's what happened in Yellowstone. So the elk populations in Yellowstone got really out of control after all of the wolves had been, killed off in, like decades and decades ago. Finally, they reintroduced them in the 90s. And the elk populations instantly not only declined to stable levels, but they also became healthier because the diseased individuals were being taken care of by the wolves.
There's a whole land grab pissing contest out there about farmers and wolves.
And it's all based on a lot of fear mongering. Really, it's very rare that wolves actually go after livestock. And when they do, it's very blown out of proportion. In fact, there was a study done that found that upwards of 70% of accusations of wolves attacking livestock were actually feral dogs.
That makes sense. Just packs of wild dogs.
Basically, feral dogs are a lot worse for livestock than actual wolves are, because wolves typically they prefer to hunt the things that they evolved to hunt.
Wild dogs are out of control whenever they start doing that too.
Wild dogs and feral cats are a real problem for bird populations too.
Yep.
Yeah.
I can imagine the wolf thing out there being kind of like Jaws, how just kill everything.
Yeah.
All the sharks, that whole chain of events.
Yeah. The good news is with wolves, they only really take as much as they need, which does pretty much stabilize the populations. So, because these animals, they evolve together, right? So it's one doesn't outrace the other. Basically, elk evolved to maintain their populations in spite of predators, and wolves evolved to take as much as they need without decimating their own food population, essentially. So it just creates an equilibrium.
Yeah, animals are usually pretty good about doing what they're supposed to do.
Unfortunately, people are not.
We get enjoy. It's like people as a species are like getting in a big kick about things. Like whenever you get into like a pickleball kick, it's all you want to play is pickleball. And so you get, you just decimate species. And
we have a really bad habit of taking more than we need and then wasting quite a lot. So a lot of the resource waste is a huge issue. So we need to get very, very good at resource efficiency if we want to have as many people as we have, because it's not necessarily an easy thing to feed 8 billion people. And a lot of people are starving because there is not an equality of resources to go around. like there's enough resources technically to feed everybody, but they're not being equally distributed. But the other issue is a lot of it goes to waste. And if so we're using so much more than we actually need. There was a calculation done that if everybody in the world lived like an American, we would need 3 times as much land as we have.
That's probably true.
Mm-hmm.
But the only thing I won't do is eat the cricket paste. They're trying to.
I probably wouldn't be very into cricket paste either. I'd probably stick to letting the lizards and things eat the crickets.
I don't want to do the ground and lab grown beef.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm watching that. We'll see what happens. So far, it doesn't seem to be any worse for you than normal beef because it is just animal cells. But
yeah,
I don't know.
It's still kind of weird. Still kind of
it's weird in concept. I think it just needs to be more thoroughly studied. Like anything, basically any new invention, we have to study the health effects of it before we distribute it en masse. But unfortunately, a lot of people are like, here's an opportunity to make money off of a new thing, and then they just throw it out there a lot quicker than they should.
Then it goes all one bad batch kills 10 people, and then nobody will eat it ever again. It's like it's not nuclear power. Like it's the safest stuff out there, but one thing happened 50 years ago, and all of a sudden.
Yeah. The Chernobyl incident was riddled with a lot of mistakes. A lot of corners were cut because the Soviet Union had this basically idea that they just needed to do things quicker. And if they did things quicker, they could beat the Americans. But unfortunately, when you rush things like that, you make mistakes. That's what happens.
Big rush.
Yeah.
I'm so wishing we would get that nuclear stuff locked in. I got to start saying nuclear, Neanderthal, nuclear.
So, and there are a lot of efforts now to figure out efficient ways to contain nuclear waste. And it's looking like we're getting pretty close to a long-term solution for nuclear waste storage, basically in these capsules that last something like 1 million years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Or just shoot it into the sun.
It's a very expensive solution, but I suppose it is one solution.
That's what I always worry about, the whole energy can't be replaced kind of thing, though. With taking mass off the Earth.
So what I've also heard is actually they are getting closer to cold fusion reactions, and that would be the ideal. Yeah. Basically, the idea there is that you're able to produce more energy than you put into a system, which of course contradicts what you would think of as Newtonian physics. But as it turns out, Newton didn't know everything about physics all those hundreds of years ago. So
just a beginner.
So actually there are a few projects right now with pretty close timelines for things like cold fusion. And if cold fusion happens, we'll just have basically a solution to energy forever. That's just unlimited clean energy, essentially.
Hopefully they'll let it happen. That's what gets me, is that's the whole Apollo program was H3, which could have solved everything, but that's why they killed it.
Well, the whole thing is like, what's going to make or break it is whether it can make money or not, because people only really care about doing things if it can make money. And if cold fusion is not something that they can monetize, people like the oil industry and even the clean energy industry are going to fight like hell to prevent it from happening, because they're making money off of their thing and they don't want something to come in and replace their thing that's not going to make money.
Like these guys inventing water that runs off hydrogen and water, cars that run off hydrogen and water.
There was that guy who very mysteriously got food poisoning and died.
Yeah.
Soon, just barely before he was able to file the patent. So I did think that was a little bit sketchy.
Then he told everyone they were going to get him. So they're coming after me. They're going to get me.
Yeah, because of the fact that people like the oil industry and the lithium industry didn't want to have to not make money, essentially. Money runs everything in the current world. I think that maybe we will one day reach a point where things will be based more on merit than money. But as for our lifetimes, I don't think that that's feasible. I think there's a lot to figure out. Clearly, things like communism didn't work. But I think that one day we will move beyond money, because it is as much of a problem as it is a solution right now.
That's what worries me about the robots, man. If they take all the jobs, no one has a job. No one can pay for the stuff that they create.
I am concerned about the rise of AI. It's true. I mean, already artists and writers are being impacted by it, which are the things that we never thought that robots would impact.
Yeah.
the creative human jobs, but they are impacting the creative human jobs now. So I am a little bit concerned by that.
Yeah, I think that was just like low hanging fruit for their abilities.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a good tool, but I hope it doesn't take over. Like, just do all the hard stuff and let us sit around and eat the mangoes and create the stuff and let our juices flow.
Well, right now, automation is the #1 job taker. In factories, in grocery stores, robots are literally stealing jobs, and it is the biggest threat to the job market right now.
Yeah, I think eventually it'll have to even its way out, because if nobody that can buy the stuff, what's the point in having the? Yeah, that's what they're going to do.
Worse. Yeah, and if people don't have jobs, that they're not going to be able to spend money. If they're not going to be able to spend money, then companies aren't going to have money, and it's going to be this vicious cycle that's basically going to create another depression.
I'm hoping it kind of gradually works itself out. As one thing comes down, the other one goes up. Not just it all topples over like a giant bubble.
Maybe. We'll see what happens.
I know humans though.
I don't try to predict the future too much, because it's
like that also Dr. Robin Hanson I was talking about, his whole shtick is the rise of the robots.
Yeah. I'm not sure it's going to be something like the Terminator, but I think that it's going to cause problems though.
His thing was the brain emulation, where we put the smartest humans inside little robots and they do the work, and humans.
I think that's a bad idea. I think that's a really bad idea. I also think the brain chip thing is a really bad idea.
Yeah, that's scary.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good tool if you're paralyzed, but damn, I don't want everybody to have one.
Well, because what's going to happen is if they can transmit thoughts into your head, they're going to be advertising to you in your dreams. That's basically how that's going to go, which is a nightmarish dystopian. Yeah. I don't want to be dreaming about McDonald's advertisements.
I already do dream about McDonald's half the time anyway. I don't need them. I don't need it officially licensed.
Mm-hmm.
I'm dreaming about something right now. I'm kind of hungry.
Yeah.
I guess we can go ahead and wrap it up. It's been an hour and a half.
Yeah, that's fair. It's been a good talk. Thanks for having me on the show.
You might be one of those guys I bring on when I have an idea. Like, hey, I got this idea.
If you have more questions, feel free to reach out. Yeah.
I will. But do you have anything you want to plug, a website or anything?
Sure. I'm on Instagram as Notorious Naturalist Max, and on TikTok as just Notorious Naturalist. And right now I'm doing this sort of science communication thing. I make fun videos. Soon I'm going to have a podcast with my girlfriend, which is going to be called ADHD Ontology, which is basically just paleontology through an ADHD lens.
Oh my God. I want to both be on that show, and I want to have you both on.
Yeah, we're still figuring out what we want it to look like. We're basically still coming up with episode concepts, but I'll let you know.
You can just do like I do and just start and just let it mold as it goes.
That's fair.
You go back and watch
develop over time.
You go back and watch my freaking train wrecks of early episodes. These I've learned how to edit, do stuff. Yeah, it's an art form. Podcasting is not just throw it up and talk.
I believe you. Yeah, I know you have to set up. It's like you had to set up all those questions. I still managed to derail it. I'm so sorry about that. It's ADHD.
Derail it? You didn't derail it.
Oh, okay.
No, this is perfect.
Okay, great.
We went everywhere, and then dinosaurs and national parks, and the only thing we didn't talk about was Bigfoot, and then I don't have to talk about that every time.
Yeah, I guess if you talk about the same thing every time, it gets a little boring.
It's the reason I'm having people like you on, and because I can't talk about Bigfoot all the time because some of those people are crazy.
It's true.
I don't know if you can imagine that. Some Bigfoot folks are lying about it.
I guess I usually imagine that scene from Close Encounters of the First Kind where the old man interrupts the big conference, and he's like, "I saw Bigfoot once. He made a sound I would not want to hear twice in my life."
He's smoking his cigar.
Yeah,
everybody's looking at him. And that's one of the examples I showed somebody. I said, "This is what I talked to. I saw Bigfoot, 7 foot tall if he was an inch." All right, man. I'll let you go. And just if you need any advice, or not advice, or technical advice or anything like that, just let me know. And I'll have you back on.
I'll hit you up for that. Yeah, and just feel free to hit me up if you want me back on.
For sure. All right. This was a ton of fun. Let me hit my theme music and have a good week.
I never didn't believe in Bigfoot. I never believed in it, I didn't believe in it. I never gave it any thought.
They kept wood knocking back and forth to each other, and it was in a pattern.
Barn owls don't typically throw rocks.
I come across these tracks.
Sasquatch is still not on my mind.